Hey everyone, I'm Deadsy, and I'm a killer main, specifically a spirit main in Dead by Daylight. Today I want to talk about pallet density and how it's fucking over M1 killers. If you've been playing M1 killers lately, you probably have felt this already, where chases are feeling longer, and every time you think you're about to catch someone, there's another fucking pallet waiting for the survivor. And after a while, it stops feeling like bad luck and starts feeling like the game is just gonna stay this way somehow. So a while back, the devs went through a bunch of maps to deal with dead zones, which, fair, nobody likes running into an empty area and just getting run down with no options. But the way they handled it was by increasing pallet density across a ton of maps as a blanket fix. Macmillan, Autohaven, Coldwind, Red Forest, Ormond, most of the map pool got touched in some way. So instead of having strong loops separated by weaker areas, you now have much more even spread of pallets across the map. And on paper, that sounds like a good thing, but in practice, it changed how chases actually play out. Most of the time, by the time you're done breaking this pallet, the survivor is on their way to camp the next pallet. So you start a chase, you're gaining on them, you're setting up to mind game, and then they drop the pallet early. You break it, they're already moving to the next tile, as I just said. You follow them, and the same thing again and again and again. And now you're 3, 4, 5 pallets deep into a single chase, and you haven't even gotten a hit yet. And yeah, some of the safer pallets got toned down, but when there are more pallets overall, survivors don't need one perfect god pallet. They just need enough decent ones to keep moving. You don't need one crazy strong pallet when you have a ton of decent pallets in a row that keep the chase going. And this hits M1 killers the hardest, because your entire game is built around staying on someone long enough to force a mistake. You don't have mobility, you don't have a power that skips pallets. You have to just deal with everything in front of you. So when survivors can constantly rotate before they're under pressure, it becomes harder to actually capitalize on anything for the killer. Meanwhile, killers with mobility or anti-loop tools don't feel this nearly as much. They cut distance, they bypass pallets, and they end chases faster. And in return, you're going to see a lot of more blights and nurses and ghouls and billies. And all of this ties into the economy of the game. Generators take 90 seconds to complete, and every second you spend in a chase matters. Breaking a pallet takes a couple of seconds, then you have to catch back up every single time. And if that happens multiple times in one chase, that time adds up quickly. So even if you're playing well, even if you're making the right decisions, you're still losing time. And while that's happening, other survivors are progressing the objective, which is to do the generators. And that's not even considering things like the new perk 5 steps ahead, plus smash hit as a combo, for example, where survivors get a speed boost off the stun and immediately create more distance. So now instead of just losing time to a pallet break, you're also losing distance on top of it, and that pushes them even closer to the next tile. And when that keeps happening over and over, the chase just doesn't feel long. It starts to feel like you're never actually catching up. And don't even get me started on Bloodlust. So then we had our recent 2v8 event, and that really highlighted the issue because pallet density felt even higher. Maps were flooded and chases turned into this constant cycle of pallet after pallet after pallet, and a lot of players started noticing that same feeling creeping into regular 1v4 matches. So even if nothing officially changed, it showed how the game feels when pallet density gets pushed too far. Everything slows down, the chases are dragging out, and instead of playing around tiles, you just end up breaking them over and over. Now, I was stupid in hoping that the pallet density would have been addressed in the all-kill comeback chapter that just released, but unfortunately, I was fucking wrong. Not only was this not mentioned, but the new map that was released for Trickster is full of god loops and line of sight breakers. There's been zero discussion from the devs about pallet chaining, no adjustments to spacing, nothing about how chases are being affected, And that's frustrating because this directly impacts how the game feels on a moment-to-moment level. And over time, this changes how both sides play. Survivors rotate earlier instead of committing to loops. Killers stop going for mind games because it's not worth the risk. So chases become more repetitive, more predictable, and honestly less interesting. And this is also going to force M1 killers to use Enduring, Brutal Strength, Spirit Fury more, and they start to feel necessary just to keep up. And when your build is focused on compensating for map design, that usually means something isn't balanced. Not only that, but killers are going to start tunneling and slugging even more. You might be asking, well, what do pallets have to do with slugging and tunneling? Well, so what happens when the killer is losing the game due to loss of time over something that was supposed to be a, quote, quality of life update? They're going to try to secure kills, especially near endgame if they don't have any yet. This isn't a skill issue. Throwing 20 plus pallets on a map does not equal skill issue. So the answer isn't removing pallets or going back to empty maps. Nobody wants that. Dead zones weren't good either. But there's a middle ground where pallets are spaced more intentionally, where chaining isn't as easy, and where both sides still have room to make meaningful decisions during a chase, instead of mindlessly pressing W and running to the yellow. This has effectively removed skill expression from the survivor side. So yeah, pallet density has had a much bigger impact than it might seem at first. There are more pallets across the map, they're easier to rotate between, and that stretches chases in a way that hits M1 killers the hardest. Less about outplaying your opponent, and more about how many pallets are left between you and the down. As you can see in this clip, I took it upon myself to keep chasing this Sable to see how many pallets she would throw at me. I was assuming that she used windows of opportunity, failed to check the endgame screen, but I could only assume that, or maybe she's just really knowledgeable at the map. But it was definitely pre-drop after pre-drop, as you can see. I just used this video as an example of how fucking crazy the pallets are. I understand that this is Gideon, and this is sort of an extreme example of pallets, but the fact of the matter is, give or take a couple of pallets here and there between maps, this is how severe it is across every map that I can think of. Now, as a Spirit main, I'm still learning how to counter pallets for the most part and see if I can play around them, but every single time I try to mind game someone, it just ends up being that they left the loop and now I'm stuck trying to chase them down again, especially after I had just used my phase, so I have to wait for that to come back, and it's just repetitive over and over and extremely boring. I'm sure for not just me, but for the survivor as well. I just feel like I'm a fucking beaver at this point, eating all of these splinters and breaking all these pallets. So before you come at me, I understand that I could have not only played better on this map because I kept whiffing everywhere because I was super frustrated, but I definitely could have handled just trying to play around the pallets better. I understand that I didn't need to break certain smaller pallets, but I wasn't thinking clearly because I was so frustrated and kept telling myself I need to remove all the resources I can. If you paid attention to this video, you would see that I broke 17 pallets on this map. That is not including the first one that the Sable dropped in the beginning, which would have been 18, but I tried to mind game that and they just ran away from it. Nevertheless, this goes to show how problematic these pallets are, and I want to remind all of the killer mains out there that this is not a skill issue, and you're doing the best you can with the resources you have, which are very limited, unlike the resources survivors have. I really want to say that I am hopeful that the devs will soon come to their senses and maybe try to play their game and see how painful it is to be a killer main these days. But I don't have very much faith in behavior, so I'm just going to leave it at that. But that wraps it up for this video. I'd like to ask you what you think of the pallets, and if you're a killer main or a survivor main, if you agree whether or not they are a little too much. Drop your thoughts in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video.